أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب زدني علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last time, some of the participants were concerned about the gender relations and the gender, it used to be called gender equality, and then people started calling it gender equity. But I don't like any of these two words. I like to use the word gender equivalence. Because equivalence means when the worth or value of two things is equal. When you say equality, and you talk about the genders, then some people can argue, if one man can have 4 wives and one woman can have only one husband, then where is the equality? So equality boils down to figures and numbers. But when you say equivalence, I like the word equivalence instead of equality or even equity. Because equivalence means two things have the same worth or the same value. And when you say that one man can have 4 wives and one woman can have only one husband, then on the face of it, it seems as if there is no equality. But there is a balance and a worth which has been created through these rules. For example, if a woman is getting half the share in her inheritance of what her brother is getting, then you also have to consider what are her duties from that wealth which she is acquiring. She is not bound to spend on anybody at all. But the man is bound to spend on so many relatives. So that's why I like to use the word equivalence, because their worth becomes equal even though the figures might be different. So we are calling these, we are going to do 2 surahs today, Surah Al-Mujadala, only those parts which are related with the gender prop issue, and also Surah Al-Mumtahina. I just remembered something very interesting which is not really of such legal or, So we were saying about, why a woman can't have 4 husbands, and many women ask this question. And a very interesting little anecdote that I just remembered is that Imam Abu Hanifa, one of the 4 jurists who codified the law, one of the, we might say 5 jurists if you include the Fiqh Jafriya, one of the 5 jurists, very important jurist, Imam Abu Hanifa, he was approached by some women. They came to him and they said, we have a question for you. And he said, okay. And they said, why can't a woman have 4 husbands if a man can have 4 wives? And at that moment, he could not think of an answer. But his daughter was present there. And so Imam Abu Hanifa said to these women, come back after so many days. So they said, okay. So his daughter said to him, I have the answer, but my condition is that after you approve of my answer, then you will use my name as your kunyat. Kunyat is when a person uses a child's name like Abu Hanifa, that means father of Hanifa. So he said, okay, he agreed. So when those women came, they must have been neighbors or something, they said to the women, go and fetch a bowl of milk from your goats, from your house. They all probably had goats. And when they came, he had a big bowl or a basin ready for them. And he said, now all of you put this milk into this big basin. So they poured the milk into the basin. And when they had done that, he said, now each one of you take out the milk that you had brought. But it should only be the milk from your house, from the milk that you had brought, not any of the other women's milk. And they said, how can we do that? It's all mixed up. It's impossible. So he said, well, this is the answer to your question. So it's a very subtle way of explaining why a woman could not have 4 husbands. And from then on, he used the title Abu Hanifa, the kunya. Now let's go to Surah Al-Mujadila. It is Surah Number 58. And this is the word Mujadila means the woman who was arguing, who argued a case. It is mentioned in the first verse. And this is the case of the woman who complained to the Prophet ﷺ about her husband. This surah was revealed around 5 al-Hijri, and it deals in detail with the topic of zihar, which is treated in a general manner in Surah Al-Ahzab. The title refers to this woman called, her name was Khawla, and her husband had pronounced the words of zihar. In pre-Islamic days, there was this custom that when they wanted to get rid of a woman, they did not like the woman, or whatever the problem was with them, they would pronounce the words of zihar, and the words were "You are for me like the back of my mother." And this meant now that they have used the mother for the wife, they are sort of like almost divorced. But doing it like this meant that the woman was neither given her freedom and nor was she given her rights as a wife. So now after the advent of Islam and after the advent of the Prophet, women had started becoming aware of their rights because so many of their rights had been mentioned in the Quran. So this lady was bold enough that she came to the Prophet and she complained about her husband. And she says, "This is what my husband has done to me and I have no life, anymore. I'm neither free nor am I a wife." So at that time, the Prophet had not received any clear instructions about this problem. So she kept on talking and complaining and disputing, and until all at once the Prophet went into the trance of the revelation and this surah was revealed. And after that, most of the companions who knew about this, they started showing a great deal of respect to Khawla because of the divine concern for her shown in the Quran. And much later, once after Hazrat Umar became the Khalifa, he was walking along with his companions and an old woman beckoned to him, called him. And he went up to her and he, with great respect and with head bent, he stood listening to her as long as she kept talking to him. And all the other companions were also waiting, and they didn't know what was going on. So when they questioned him, he said this was Khawla binti Talba, whose complaint God had heard in the 7th heavens and responded with revelation. And he said that if she had stood there all night, he would have attended to her. So this is how women were given more and more respect. Another thing that I remembered about Hazrat Umar, he was also a little strict in some things, and he did not want his wife to go to the mosque, the Prophet's mosque, Masjid al-Nabawi, for her prayers. But she said, if God allows me, and if the Prophet allows me, then who are you to, stop me? So she would go right in front of him for all the prayers that she wanted to join in the mosque, and there was not a word that he could say to her. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا وَتَشْتَكِي إِلَى اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ يَسْمَعُ تَحَاوُرَكُمَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ. Indeed, God has heard the words of the woman who argued with you about her husband and complained to God. God heard the exchange between you two. Indeed, God is the ever-hearing, the ever-seeing. الَّذِينَ يُظَاهِرُونَ مِنْكُمْ مِنْ نِسَائِهِمْ مَا هُنَّ أُمَّهَاتِهِمْ إِنْ أُمَّهَاتُهُمْ إِلَّا اللَّائِي وَلَدْنَهُمْ إِنَّهُمْ لَيَقُولُونَ مُنْكَرًا مِنَ الْقَوْلِ وَزُورًا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَعَفُوٌّ غَفُورٌ. So those who practice zihar, this practice of declaring one's wife to be like his mother by the husband, so those who practice zihar with their wives and put them away by calling them their mothers should know that they can never be their mothers. These are the words of the Quran. Their mothers are none but those who gave birth to them. They utter something that is most undesirable and a lie. Indeed, God is the condoner, the all-forgiving. That means God will forgive what has happened in the past, but not after this revelation. It could be anger, it could be that they wanted to take another wife, or if they were so free to do this, it didn't bother them, they could just say it for any little thing. But if they have to, now you'll come to all the punishments and the atonement, the kafara that they had to give for it, then you will realize that human beings very often stay away from some of the things which they wouldn't otherwise when they are asked to, when they are given some kind of a punishment. That's human nature. And that's what the police is for. وَالَّذِينَ يُظَاهِرُونَ مِن نِّسَائِهِمْ ثُمَّ يَعُودُونَ لِمَا قَالُوا فَتَحْرِيرُ رَقَبَةٍ مِّن قَبْلِ أَن يَتَمَاسَّا ذَلِكُمْ تُوعَظُونَ بِهِ وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ خَبِيرٌ. As for those who practice jihad with their wives, then would like to go back on what they had uttered, should free a slave before touching each other. So here is the first, point of atonement, that if they want to go back on what they had uttered, now at that time they could just say, you are like my mother, and then whenever they wanted their wife back, they would say, okay, come on. Then here they are being told they would have to free a slave before touching each other. This has been ordained for you. God is well aware of what you do. So the first point of expiation is by freeing a slave, and that was not easy for everyone to do because, they would have to pay the price for it. So this was, of course, a way out for those who had uttered the words of jihad without really intending to divorce their wives. And also the point here is that the freeing of slaves was an expiation for many sins, and this was because this was paving the way for a gradual end to slavery. Then if this is not possible, then he should feed 60 needy persons. Now, feeding 60 needy persons is also a handful. And also there is the choice, either you would call all 60 persons together and you feed them, or you could feed one person every day for 60 days. This is to show that you believe in God and His Messenger. These are the limits of the law set by God. For those who do not comply, there is a painful punishment. So if they do not expiate by doing these things, then they will be punished. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُحَادُّونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ كُبِتُوا كَمَا كُبِتَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ وَقَدْ أَنزَلْنَا آيَاتٍ بَيِّنَاتٍ وَلِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابٌ مُهِينٌ. Indeed, those who defy God and His Messenger will be humiliated. So, doing a thing like this is like defying God and His Messenger. These are very strong words. The way those before them were humiliated. We have sent down clear revelations, and for the unbelievers, there is a humiliating punishment. That means, if they do not comply, if they do not offer these atonements, then that means they are for the unbelievers. That means they will be not considered to be Muslims anymore. Now, there is the problem that people today might say, where can we get a slave to set him free? There is no slavery anymore. It's almost done away with. So I feel that one can also help to free a prisoner who has been wrongfully detained, or according to some commentators, relieving from bondage of debt or poverty. If somebody is so, indebted to other people, he just doesn't know how to get out of this debt, and he's really poor, then one can help to relieve that person from his debt and poverty. And this thing about fasting, this is not in this. This was for another thing. On the day when God will, يَوْمَ يَبْعَثُهُمُ اللَّهُ جَمِيعًا فَيُنَبِّئُهُم بِمَا عَمِلُوا أَحْصَاهُ اللَّهُ وَنَسُوهُ وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ شَهِيدٌ. On the day when God will raise them up and gather them together, He will inform them of what they did. For God has kept an account of it, while they have forgotten. God is a witness over all things. I think I missed out this little sentence. That's what I was looking for. Verse number 4. For the one who cannot free a slave, he should fast for 2 months without a break. I think I missed this out. I'm sorry. That's what I was looking for. He should fast for 2 months without a break. It's difficult enough to fast for a month, but fasting for 2 months when nobody around you is fasting. In Ramadan, it's very easy because everybody else is fasting. But when no one else is fasting, then it becomes more difficult. And to fast for 2 months consecutively, like even if there's one if you miss one fast, then you start all over again. Supposing that person has fasted for, say, 25 days and he misses one fast, then he will start from the first fast all over again and do it for 2 long months. And if this is not possible, then he should feed 60 needy persons or one person for 60 days. So there are 3 choices that this person has. And also God has used very strong words to punish a person who does this act and who does not atone for it, who does not make up for it. So I hope this will bring out the point that women's rights were really taken care of by the new Sharia that was being promulgated. Now we can go to Surah Al-Mumtahina. This is Surah number 60. Mumtahina is from the word imtihan, like some woman is being, or the women are being examined. So this means some women have to be examined. Now we have to see who are the women who have to be examined. This starts in verse number 10. According to the Pact of Al-Hudaybiyah, any man who accepted the faith and migrated to Medina would be returned to the believers. This was a part of the Surah Hudaybiyah. If you want to know what Surah Hudaybiyah was, maybe sometime later we can talk about it. And in that they had put in many clauses. This was a pact between the people of Makkah, the non-believers, the pagans, and the Prophet and his followers. And this was made on the outskirts of Makkah in Hudaybiyah. So it's called the Pact of Hudaybiyah. And there were many clauses which were put down in it according to the agreement of both the parties. But there was one clause which the Prophet agreed to, but which the most of his followers were very upset about. But since, of course, the Prophet had all this wisdom and foresight, later on they realized that what the Prophet had said was correct. So one of the clauses was that if anyone escapes from Makkah, he accepts Islam and he escapes from Makkah to Medina, he sort of migrates, then the people in Medina would have to catch him and would have to return him to Makkah. This is the clause that the people just could not understand. But later on they discovered the wisdom in it. So at that time, many of the men of course were migrating to Medina, but a time came when a lot of women whose husbands had not accepted Islam, they started migrating to Medina on their own without their husbands. So the Makkans came and they argued with the Prophet and said, "You had made this agreement with us, now please return these women to us." Of course, most of those who came to ask for the women, they were the husbands of these women who had not accepted Islam. And they had stayed behind originally, but when the wives migrated, they came running after them. So now new instructions are given here about these women. And another thing was that when they said, "We want our women back," you had put this down in the agreement. The Muslims took out the agreement, the manuscript, and they studied it and they said, there is no mention of women at all. Maybe at that time they hadn't realized that women would become so independent that they would accept Islam on their own independently and also migrate to Medina. So there was no clause about women. And then new instructions are given here in these verses about these women. Henceforth, no believing woman will be allowed to marry or stay married to a polytheist man, to a pagan man, and will therefore not be returned. The Prophet ﷺ is asked to test the woman's faith and then perform the bay'ah, or as we call it, the bet, which is a kind of an oath of allegiance. So according to modern interpretations, this bet is one's preference for an allegiance to a leader, and it is the equivalent of a modern democratic vote. Aziza Al-Hibri is the first person, she's an Arab scholar, and I, for the first time, came across this idea that the bet or the bay'ah which the women are doing in Medina, they are giving a vote to the Prophet, and they are saying, they are promising that, we are accepting you as our leader. So this means that the democratic vote was given to the Muslim women right at the time of the Prophet. which the women of the Western world managed to get only at the end of the, I think, 20th century or 19th century, I think. So the women could vote independently of the men. In some countries, even now, the men are restricting the women, even though legal vote is there, but they are restricting the women and not allowing them to go to vote. So this surah was revealed between 8 and 10 al-Hijri. And there are some other points which we'll come to later. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tattakhizu aduwwi wa aduwwakum awliya tulquna ilayhim bil mawaddati wa qad kafaru bima ja'akum minal haqq yukhrijuna ar-rasula wa iyyakum an tu'minu billahi rabbikum in kuntum kharajtum jihadan fi sabili wa ibtigha'a mardati tusirruna ilayhim bil mawadda wa anna a'lamu bima akhfaytum wa ma a'lantum وَمَنْ يَفْعَلْهُ مِنْكُمْ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ سَوَاءَ السَّبِيلِ. O you who believe, do not make my enemies and your enemies your close friends. You express your love for them, but they deny that which has come to you of the truth. Actually, this is not the gender issue, but at least I would like to read this one first verse beginning. They expel the messenger as well as you simply because you believe in God, your Lord. If you go out for fighting in my way and for my pleasure, you send them a message of love, even though I know that you have concealed and what you have revealed. The one who does this from amongst you has indeed lost the right path. Surah An-Nisa, verse number 10. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu iza ja'akumul mu'minatu muhajiratin fa'amtihumunna. Allahu a'lamu bi'imanihinna wa in allimtumuhunna mu'minatin fala tarji'uhunna ila al-kuffar la hunna hillun lahum wa la hum yahilluna lahunna wa atuhum ma anfaqu wa la junaha alaykum an tankihuhunna idza ataytumuhunna ujurahunna wa la tumsiku bi'ismi kawafiri wasalu ma anfaqtum wal yas'alu ma anfaqu. Zalikum hukmullahi yahkumu bainakum wallahu alimun hakim. O you who believe in truly believing women, that is, the word used here is mu'minat, mu'min and Muslim. Why are these words? What is the difference in these two words? Muslim can be anybody who has just recited the shahada or the kalama, but he does not practice the faith fully. He could be practicing it, but not necessarily. And Mu'min is somebody whose whole, his existence now is sort of he's dived into this religion, and he's just, his heart and mind and his body and his every, cell in the body is now a believer. So Mu'min is a higher status than the Muslim. In fact, there is a verse in the Quran, can't remember which surah it is, but it says to the people of the desert, the Bedouins, tell them that you have become Muslims, but you have not become Mu'mins. So the Mu'min is one who is truly believing in and truly following the full faith. So all you will believe, when truly believing women migrate and come to you, test them. So what was the test that he was supposed to? He had to ask some questions which he was informed about. And the questions were, the first one was that they had to swear in the name of the one and only God that they had not escaped because of bad relations with their husbands. That means they had not made this migration an excuse because they had wanted to run away in any case. It was not that. They had come because of the faith and because of God and His Prophet. And they had not escaped because of being disillusioned with Makkah. Because of some reason, they did not like Makkah, and therefore they thought Medina was a better place to live in, and that's why they had migrated. And also, if you go to Makkah and Medina for any purpose, you will feel the difference in the two cities. And they say that the Jalal of God is to be felt in Makkah, and the Jamal of God is to be felt in Medina. Jalal is the majesty and the intensity and all such things which can be felt in Makkah. But in Medina, you will feel the compassion and the mercy and love which the Prophet's city is supposed to give out. So this was also one of the questions, that they were not disillusioned with Makkah, that they had wanted to migrate for some other reason. And they had not escaped because of worldly greed, because they thought, okay, if I now go and pretend to be a Muslim, then I'll be getting the spoils of war, the mal ghanimat, and this, so on and so forth. But and also they had to swear that they had left their homes simply for the sake of the love of God and His Prophet. So these were the things that they were asked to first swear in the name of God, that this is why they wanted to migrate. So this was a way of testing their sincerity and to see if the migration was only for greed or for worldly reasons, or it was truly for the faith. Now, the point in the clause in the agreement of Hudaybiyah, the pact of Hudaybiyah, was that anyone who is under the guardianship of, in those days, if one was weak, one would go into the guardianship of somebody who was stronger, and that person now became responsible for protecting him. So the point that the Makkans had was that this woman was under the guardianship of her husband and she has escaped, and that therefore we want her to be returned. But the point is, from the Muslim point of view, it is said that once she has accepted the faith and he has not, then their marriage is annulled. It has become null and void. So if that marriage has become null and void, then the guardianship of the husband has also become annulled. So, and also the fact, this I'm trying to point out the importance that was given to women, that the woman's answer to all these questions that I just read out to you, her answer was accepted without any other investigation. Because it is according to our faith, anyone who declares that he's a Muslim, he has accepted Islam, then you're not supposed to doubt it. In fact, I remember there was a case of a person in a jihad who, when he came under the sword of a Muslim, he recited the kalima. He said, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. But the person who had the sword in his hand said he's doing this just to save his life. He's a hypocrite. So in any case, he cut off his, neck. He killed him. And then the Prophet later said, how do you know that he had not accepted the faith at that very minute? So since the faith resides in the heart and there is no way of checking the heart, therefore if a person declares himself to be a Muslim, you just accept it. Now it is also said that the dissolution of the marriage with this non-believing husband is the equivalent of a khula or khul, in which the woman initiates the divorce. And when a woman initiates the divorce, you already know that she has to return the meher or the dower that she had been given by the husband. So this is going to be done in these cases as well. I'll read this Surah 10 again. O you who believe, when truly believing women migrate and come to you, test them. God is aware of their faith. If you find that they are true believers, then do not return them to the unbelievers. So you have to accept the fact that they are speaking the truth. Believing women are not lawful for unbelievers, and neither are the unbelievers lawful for believing women. And up to that point, believing men and women used to marry unbelieving men and women, but from now on, this thing is going to be stopped. This practice is now being forbidden. And return what they, that is the unbelievers, had spent on them as dower. There is no harm if you marry them after giving them their marriage portion. You should also not retain the unbelieving women. Similarly, if it's the opposite, if the woman is the unbeliever, then you should not keep her back forcefully. Ask them to return what you spent on them, just as the unbelievers should ask for what they have spent. This is God's decree. He decides between you, for God is the all-knowing, the wise. So, some commentators mentioned that there were only 6 cases in the Prophet's lifetime in which the wife deserted a believing husband. So, these cases were rare, but the other cases were more frequent, in which the wife deserted a non-believing husband. So in either case, And now again you can see the justice that the Prophet has established, that whether whether the husband is the believer or whether the husband is the non-believer, if he had given her a dower, which he must have, then that has to be returned to him, either by the new husband, or if she has not found a new husband by then by the government or the communal treasury or the Baitul Mal, as it is called. So it has to be returned to the person who had originally paid the dower. This is God's decree, and He decides between you. God is the all-knowing, the wise. If a woman, وَإِنْ فَاتَكُمْ شَيْءٌ مِّنْ أَزْوَاجِكُمْ مِنَ الْكُفَّارِ فَعَاقَبْتُمْ فَآتُوا الَّذِينَ ذَهَبَتْ أَزْوَاجُهُمْ مِثْلَ مَا أَنفَقُوا وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي أَنْتُمْ بِهِ مُؤْمِنُونَ. If a woman from your, that is the believers' wives, escapes to the unbelievers, then it is your turn to give from the spoils to the persons whose wives have gone, the like of what they had spent. This we have already discussed. Fear God, the one in whom you believe. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu, isja'akal mu'minatu yubayyinaka ala an la yushrikna billahi shay'an wa la yasriqna wa la yaznina wa la yaqtulna awladahunna wa la yatina bi buhtani yaftarina baina aydihinna wa arjulihinna wa la ya'sinaka fil ma'rufi fabaihunna wastaghfir lahunna Allah inna Allaha ghafurur rahim. O Prophet, when believing women come to you to take the oath of allegiance on the fact that they will not ascribe any partners to all. Now this is the first points that we had read, group of points, was testing them. And now this is the second group of points which are to be included in their oath, in their promise. Oath of allegiance on the fact that they will not ascribe any partners to God. That always comes first, that they will not do shirk, nor steal. So these are all major sins, kabair. So they will not steal, and according to some, this stealing includes all kinds of other, things like cheating or telling lies, etc., etc. Nor fornicate, nor kill their children, nor fabricate any lies, nor disobey you in anything that is just. If they promise to do all these things, then you can take their oath and ask forgiveness for them from God. Indeed, God is the much forgiving, the ever merciful. So when you are satisfied that these women have not come for any devious reasons, for any material reasons, then you are prepared now to take their oath and also make them promise these things. Now, it's also interesting to know that even though I have not read the oath of allegiance and the points, the clauses which were included in them, that were taken from men, but I have read that the points for the men and the women were almost the same. So here is your equality or equivalence, as I prefer to call it. O you who believe, do not, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tatawallu qawman ghadiballahu alayhim qad yaisu min al-akhirati kama yaisal kuffaru min ashabil qubur. O you who believe, do not make friends with the people whom God has expressed His wrath. They have lost hope in the hereafter, the way the unbelievers among those in the graves have lost hope. So, a Muslim, a believer, has the hope in the mercy of God, even if he knows he has done the worst possible things. He has committed a lot of crimes and sins, but he knows that God is Ghafur Rahim and He's waiting for us to be forgiven. We just have to ask for forgiveness and then He will forgive us. And we also have this hope that the Prophet ﷺ will be doing intercession for us, shifa. But those who do not believe, they have neither hope for this world nor for the next. And the unbelieving dead are the most despondent of all. If the woman did not have proper rights or almost equal rights to men, then the Prophet would have said, this woman has migrated from Makkah all by herself. She doesn't have a husband to protect her or as a guardian. So let her get married first and then I will take her oath of allegiance. Or she should come with her husband. No, he didn't say anything of the kind. Neither does God give that condition. So the woman could just come and talk to the Prophet on her own. So if there are no questions, then that is very encouraging. That means you people are, those who had some concerns are now convinced. So if we don't have any questions, then we can now maybe go back to our Surah An-Nisa and try to do a little bit from what we have been doing in continuation and sequence. Yes, we were supposed to continue with verse number 71. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Verse number 71 it does not mention jihad, but it has as its background something to do with jihad. So, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu khuzu hizrakum fanfiru subatin awinfiru jamia. O you who believe, be cautious and then move out either in groups or all together. So this is like the battle formation, how the people should be arranged themselves and how they should go out to fight. So they are being encouraged to participate in what kind of a fight is this? What kind of a war or battle? This is a jihad. But it's also interesting that the word jihad in this sense has not been mentioned in the Quran, at least. If it has been, please point it out to me. Always the word qital is used for fighting in the way of God. So what is being said here means that you should not go out individually, because it won't be easy when you're in a warlike condition, in a situation. It will not be easy for one man to fight it out by himself. So you should be either in groups or you should all be together in one big group all together. At the Fatah Makkah, that is the victory of Makkah, the Prophet had 10,000 men with him, which for that time was a big number. And in fact, the Makkans didn't know how many men were in the army. So as a matter of strategy, he said to his people, climb these hills and keep a distance between you and light as many fires as you can. So they must have lighted at least 10,000 fires. And normally a fire was enough for several people. But when the Makkans saw that many fires lighted, they really got scared. And another thing they did was they did not go through the same route. In the end, they all came together and the Prophet divided them into, I think, 4 groups. And they entered through the 4 entrances that were there to enter Makkah. And so that no one could escape from any of these routes. So that was also a part of the strategy. Now here it is said, Khuzu hizrakum, that means make full preparations for war against opponents, like, have all your equipment ready and all the strategy and all the things that are necessary. Also food, of course, all the things that are necessary for the war. And another thing which I have understood so far, I can't say that maybe sometime later I'll understand something different, but up to all this reading that I have done, I have come to the conclusion that the jihad is a defensive war. Because every time, as we read, I'm mentioning this now because as we read, you will come across these statements where the believers are asked to stop fighting when the persecution ends. That means they were supposed to fight when somebody was persecuting them, but after the persecution ended, they're supposed to stop fighting. So, O you who believe, be cautious in the sense of being well prepared, and then move out either in groups or all together. وَإِنَّ مِنْكُمْ لَمَنْ لَيُبَتِّئَنَّ فَإِنْ أَصَابَتْكُمْ مُصِيبَةٌ قَالَ قَدْ أَنَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيَّ إِذْ لَمْ أَكُنْ مَعَهُمْ شَهِيدًا. There are some among you who, if you are faced by adversity, say, God has blessed me in that I was not present with them. According to some commentators, this refers to Abdullah bin Ubay, he was known as the leader of the hypocrites, Munafiqeen. And of course, he never accepted Islam, but he pretended to have accepted Islam. It is also said that before the Prophet migrated to Medina, Abdullah bin Ubay was going to be crowned the king of Medina. So all his the hopes of leadership were shattered when the Prophet migrated and people started joining his group or his faith by droves. So Abdullah bin Ubay was also always trying to, hurt by being a hypocrite. All those who were hypocrites were trying to hurt the followers from within. You see, because they said we have accepted the faith, and then they joined them in the activities, and then from inside they would be sabotaging the activities. So Abdullah bin Ubay would say, if the believers faced some kind of adversity, he would say, God has blessed me in that I was not present with them. By not going with them, I have been saved. And وَلَئِنْ أَصَابَكُمْ فَضْلٌ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لَيَقُولَنَّ كَلَّمْ تَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ وَبَيْنَهُ مَوَدَّةٌ يَا لَيْتَنِي كُنْتُ مَعَهُمْ فَأَفُوزَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. But if you receive success from God, that means if the believers are successful, like at Badr, he will say, as if there is no friendship between you and him, he would say, if only I was with them, I would have attained great success. And of course, this was the thinking of most of the hypocrites, but Abdullah bin Ubay actually said it. فَلْيُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يَشْرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا بِالْآخِرَةِ وَمَنْ يُقَاتِلْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَيُقْتَلْ أَوْ يَغْلِبْ فَسَوْفَ نُؤْتِيهِ أَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. So those who have bartered this life for the hereafter should fight in the way of God. The one who fights in the way of God and is either killed or is successful, we will give them a great reward. Who have bartered this life for the hereafter means those people who are more concerned about the hereafter and they consider this world and this life to be of very little importance, hardly any importance or no importance. So what they are trying to do in this world is they are constantly trying to do things which will earn them the hereafter, earn them the best things in the next life. So here in this verse number 74, it is said that only those people can fight in the way of God who would rather buy the next life, who would buy the next life instead of this unimportant life. And the one who fights in the way of God and is either killed or is successful, we will give them a great reward. So here it is said that no matter anyone who's fighting in all sincerity in the cause of God, no matter whether he gets killed and becomes a shaheed or he is successful and he becomes a ghazi, in both cases he will be rewarded. So no matter what he does, the believer is successful. وَمَا لَكُمْ لَا تُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ الَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَخْرِجْنَا مِنْ هَٰذِهِ الْقَرْيَةِ الظَّالِمِ أَهْلُهَا وَاجْعَل لَّنَا مِن لَّدُنكَ وَلِيًّا وَاجْعَل لَّنَا مِن لَّدُنكَ نَصِيرًا. What has happened to you that you do not fight in the way of God, even though many of those who are weak among the men and women and children say, O our Lord, relieve us from this city of oppressors, and appoint for us by your grace a friend, and appoint for us by your grace a helper. So who are these people, the weak men, women and children? These are the women, children and those men who could not face the migration in such difficult situations. They who were left behind in Makkah used to pray for help since they were being persecuted by the Makkans. So they're calling this the city of oppressors. Relieve us from the city of oppressors and appoint for us by your grace a friend and appoint for us by your grace a helper. So they are asking God to send somebody who would help them out of this situation. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَالَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا يُقَاتِلُونَ فِي سَبِيلِ الطَّاغُوتِ فَقَاتِلُوا أَوْلِيَاءَ الشَّيْطَانِ إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. Those who believe fight in the way of God, while those who deny fight in the way of the evil forces of the Taghut, that is the forces of Shaitan. So fight the friends of Shaitan, for the strategy of Shaitan is deficient. The strategy of shaitan might be successful for a little while, but it will not be successful forever. So anyone who is strong enough to face this will succeed in the end, no matter whether it's in a battlefield or anywhere else. So the strategy of shaitan becomes strong, it is said, only when the person who is dealing with it gives in to temptation, because that's what shaitan wants you to do, to give in to temptation, and then you become weak, and then shaitan gets a hold over that person and will not let that person go. I think we have finished a ruku, and we'll inshallah carry on from there next time. We will also do some more of the gender equivalence verses, and we'll let you know which ones we want to do next time. And also, if there is another question which comes to your mind, even after class, you can just note it down and bring it along with you. I will most certainly be happy to be able to answer it. If I have the answer, inshallah, we'll deal with it. Let's do this very small dua, which is very compact. It sort of covers everything. So it feels as if there is no need to ask any other dua after this. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanatan wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina azaban nar. وَأَدْخِلْنَا الْجَنَّةَ مَعَ الْأَبْرَارِ يَا عَزِيزُ يَا غَفَّارُ يَا رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ بِرَحْمَتِكَ يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ آمين ثم آمين.